Last Halloween, I did a Halloween special on the ghost of Arnold Brooks, disclosing his interesting life and talking about an infamous painting that hung in the local bar, called the Mansion House, that supposedly held the spirit of the old African-American man. And if you haven't seen that video, I would highly suggest you take a look at that either before or after this video. But in the research, a particular passage written in the Mercersburg Journal stuck out at me. Published on page 4 of the Mercersburg Journal on January the 11th, 1901, a friend of Arnold's named Lynn Harbaugh wrote the following. Sometime late in the year 1872, after a brief sickness, Arnold Brooks was gathered unto his fathers, and in the presence of many of his fellow townsmen was laid to rest at the lower end of the lot upon which he had lived so many years. There, by the side of his wife and children, he sleeps, without any stone to mark the grave, and it cannot be many years until all traces of his burial place will have disappeared. There his body rests, not in consecrated ground, it's true, but the wayfaring man who would pause near that quiet spot at evening tide, when the sun has almost reached the edge of the mountain in the west, might observe that the steeple of an ancient church has cast a shadow almost over the grave of one whose talent was not laid away in a napkin or buried in the ground. He was honest, zealous, and faithful, and to do the right as he saw it, and now rests from his labors forevermore. It cannot be many years until all traces of his burial place will have disappeared, says Mr. Harbaugh in the year 1901, this being 28 years after the death of old Arnold, which actually occurred on February the 24th, 1873. Unfortunately, Mr. Harbaugh was right. As the thief of time takes away memories and even landmarks, the clues Lynn provided in this newspaper article is really all we have in the year 2025 to know the location of the resting place of Arnold Brooks. He never received a gravestone, as Mr. Harbaugh says. It is our goal in this video to put on our Sherlock Holmes hat and follow the clues and use ancient techniques to bring history to life and to honor a man of this town that once inspired many, but has now been lost to time. In honor of the 275th anniversary of the town of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania, join us as we discover the long-lost grave of Mercersburg's one and only Arnold Brooks. Lynn Harbaugh says, Arnold was gathered unto his fathers, and in the presence of many of his fellow townsmen was laid to rest at the lower end of the lot upon which he had lived so many years. Now, according to the 1868 map, an A. Brooks owned a house located on California Street, located at the corner of the alleyway connecting to the back of the Upper West Conocajig Presbyterian Church. That would be this corner right up here. That's California Street, and this is the alleyway. The current house, which is right behind me here, it sits on that corner, is not the original house that Arnold lived in. However, it sits on the foundation of that house. The old house was torn down and replaced with this one. Now, he was buried in the lower end of the lot, meaning the back of the lot. Most likely, one of the corners here in the backyard. So if you turn around, this is the lot, and somewhere in this corner here, or one of these corners. The question is, which corner? Lynn then says, there his body rests, not in consecrated ground, it's true, but the wayfaring man who would pause near that quiet spot at evening tide, when the sun has almost reached the edge of the mountain in the west, might observe that the steeple of an ancient church has cast a shadow almost over the grave. Behind the house's lot is the Upper West Conocajig Presbyterian Church, a church that's congregation has existed in this area since before the creation of the United States, and the church not that far removed from that. Truly an ancient church. The church has a steeple that, if the sun sinks to the edge of the mountains to the west, would cast a shadow in this direction, particularly in the summertime. Now, the steeple used to be a lot higher, but it has been removed due to disrepair in the past. Now, the closest corner to that church is the one located here, right next to the alleyway, at the end of that fence before the garage there. Now that we have the general location, how do we locate the graves for real? This is a volunteer effort that involves no extra money that we can afford ground-penetrating radar. The answer, though, can come in the form of a cheaper option, and that's called dowsing rods. Dowsing rods are a tool used since ancient times for a variety of uses, such as finding water, gemstones, and lost graves. Today, many people use dowsing rods and this technique to find underground water lines, sewer lines, and underground water sources for drilling wells. In fact, I know people in the sewer authorities that use this technique when you call 811 to request to find your utility lines. Though ancient churches referred to this technique as divination, it has proved quite effective and can be done by like 90% of the human population. A small amount of people has an exceptional skill at dowsing, in which they can use a green stick in the shape of a Y rather than dowsing rods, but most people can make use of the rods. How do you use dowsing rods for searching for lost bodies? And that is why we are here at the Robert Kennedy Memorial Presbyterian Church in Welsh Run, outside of Mercersburg, because we're here to test on similar age graves that we know exist and test the dowsing rods out to make sure that they function properly. But according to grave searchers, you are to use 2 metal rods, and these could be coat hangers or some other copper rod that you may find, and you bend them in a 90-degree bend, and you make sure that they're as straight as you can make them. And for the use of detecting graves, you hold the rods like demonstrated here, slightly tilted down, and you walk slowly over the area in which you think the grave is at. Note that typical burials in the U.S. are buried in the Christian way, in which the body is oriented with the head to the west and the feet to the east. So when Christ returns and we are resurrected, we will be looking east towards Jesus. This is not a plug for a particular religion. It is just fact on how most cemeteries are arranged in the U.S. today. Use a compass to orient yourself correctly and try to walk north-south or south-north across the area to better detect the graves. When your feet actually step on top of the grave site, the rods should cross. Once you step off of the grave, they will uncross. For detecting the sex of the individual buried at a particular location, we need to walk from foot to head or head to foot, which would be east to west or west to east. If the rods turn to the operator's right, it is a male. If the rods turn to the left, it's a female. So you may be asking yourself as I explain this, why does this work? Like, what is powering this? Well, tell you the truth, we don't really know. And however, we do have a few theories that we can throw out there. If we accept that all life has a connection in the form of some sort of energy field, as many world religions suggest, we can assume that this connection can be accessed or harnessed. For example, in the Judeo-Christian beliefs, King Solomon writes in Ecclesiastes 12 that at the time of your death, the silver cord of life is cut, disconnecting you at death from God, and thus that divine spark of life. He continues by saying that once this cord is cut, your body returns to the earth in the grave, and the spirit will return to God, who gave it to you. Though this connection is severed, is it possible for us to still detect this energy field? Well, according to Christian traditions, we will become resurrected someday, much like Christ himself. And so our soul will return to our bodies, which is why it is traditional to bury our dead facing east. So when we rise from our graves, we can see Jesus in the air to the east. It is said that this resurrection is so exact that the dead lost at sea will rise from the oceans also. If this is true, then God, or the universal consciousness, or the central energy force of the universe, or whatever you may want to call it or him, would have to know where the bodies are buried, so to speak, so to send back your soul in spirit during resurrection. This shows there is still some sort of energy field connection to allow that to occur. To explain such a phenomenon in science seems absolutely impossible. But we have a theory, anyhow, on how this could happen. The strangest thing we can think of in science to explain such a strange phenomenon is quantum mechanics. In science circles, classical physics, which deals with large particles such as Sir Isaac Newton's apples, for instance, is at great odds with the behaviors seen of microscopic particles such as protons, neutrons, and electrons. The behavior of these microscopic particles is described more accurately in quantum physics rather than classical physics. One of the major differences is a behavior of small particles referred to as quantum entanglement. Quantum entanglement is the phenomenon of a group of particles being generated, interacting, or sharing spatial proximity in such a way that the quantum state of each particle of the group cannot be described independently of the state of the others, including when the particles are separated by a large distance. That was a mouthful, wasn't it? Let's put it in more layman's terms, since I'm a simple individual. In other words, quantum entanglement is when two particles are linked together in a certain way that no matter how far apart that they are in space, even light years away, they are still connected. If a particle in one galaxy is quantum entangled with a particle in another galaxy, and if the particle in the first galaxy was acted upon by some sort of outside force, then the other in the complete other galaxy light years away will simultaneously react to that force, even though it's not occurring to them, it's occurring to their partner particle on the other side of the universe. Einstein, in a 1935 paper, referred to quantum entanglement as spooky action at a distance. Our bodies, when returned to the earth in death, deteriorate in form, but our particles, like our atoms, stay the same. On a quantum level, our atoms still maintain their properties as they had before. If our atoms that once made up our bodies are connected in quantum entanglement with a universal consciousness, or God for that matter, that connection may be tapped into by someone else that also has that silver cord connection. Now, according to this theory, as human beings contain that spirit and have that silver cord connection, and so we should be able, via our own connection to the central energy field, utilize quantum entanglement to detect bodies. The only way that we personally can explain the dowsing technique is with quantum entanglement. And as Einstein said, it's spooky.
See this joint in your thumb? Put your finger in there like that.
I want a stromboli, a medium, but instead of getting the different meats, can I just get grilled chicken?
Maybe sounded like that one,
Yes. Substitute meat.
that works perfect for him.
That's all I want, is grilled chicken.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's all. Medium stromboli, grilled chicken. Okay, thank you.
There.
So turn left.
Now hold it. I want to put a stick in it. Put it across at your feet.
back.
Well, see, we figured that most of their body is underneath this fence.
Oh, yeah. Could you go,
Yeah, turn to the left.
and give her my phone number, have someone call me.
And using dowsing rod techniques, we have discovered what appears to be 3 graves at the corner of this lot next to the alleyway, as Mr. Lynn Harbaugh discussed in his newspaper article from 1901. Here lies, right here at this first stake, in the far corner, a male, which we figure is most likely Arnold Brooks. And next to the male is a female, which is most likely Arnold's wife. And then the next grave on this other stake here is another female. So Lynn Harbaugh refers to her as Arnold's children. Arnold only had one daughter. Her name was Cassie. And according to Mr. Harbaugh, Cassie married Joshua Good and died leaving a son. In 1901, Joshua Good remarried and took Hattie Allen as his wife, settling in a shanty in CV Avenue in Waynesboro, Pennsylvania, with his new bride and his son, whose name was John Good. Joshua Good then shows up again in 1902 in the newspapers, accused of beating with a club his 10-year-old son John, who he had to a previous marriage. Taken to court, the judge ordered for the young boy to be sent to a reformatory school for his behavior. Though we cannot prove it, it is quite possible that this third grave that we found here today is actually Cassie. And she probably died in childbirth, giving birth to John around 1892. And the impoverished Joshua Good, her husband, having no money to bury his wife because he was living in a shanty in CV Avenue, had her buried here in Mercersburg next to her parents. Another option is this female next to Mr. and Mrs. Arnold Brooks could be a grandchild also, but I would probably find it more feasible that it's Cassie, their daughter.
I worked with Bob for your dad. Yeah, Bob and him, Jack Noah, and I can't say all your name.
This is James Buchanan Deluxe Scotch Whiskey, made by the James Buchanan Distillery in Scotland, which is the clan area for the Buchanan family, where James Buchanan's family came from. And we're going to have a toast to Arnold Brooks, because he hauled James Buchanan around when he was in the Mercersburg area.
The president.
As president.
Yeah. Okay.
See, I wasn't in the picture.
All right, you all ready?
Yep.
All right. Here lies the remains of Arnold Brooks and family as they maintain that connection to the Almighty that governs the universe. With these stones, we reconsecrate the ground so future generations will know who is buried here. No matter how young or old or rich or poor, let us mark the location of our dead so history will not forget them and their atoms may lay undisturbed until the powers of this universe calls us home. To Mercersburg's son, the ideal hostler, stage driver, philosopher, and friend, Arnold Brooks.
Here, here,
Here, here. Just so you know, there was 2 toasts. Because you always have to have a little extra drink. Anyhow, thank you for watching. If you wish to see more, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. I would like to thank everyone who was involved in this project, including the owner of the property that allowed us to set these stones, my father for taking the time to carve the stones and organize a lot of this, and Derek Forsyth, Roger Musselman, and Herb Price for showing up and representing the African American community of Mercersburg also for joining us as well. I'm glad they were able to come and celebrate the life of Arnold Brooks with us here in the town of Mercersburg, Pennsylvania. Remember, these stories are ours, and it is our duty to keep these stories alive. And also remember, you never know what for history you may find buried in your backyard. See you next time as I explore What in the History.